third section of the newsreel record of our invasion, these further graphic pictures show the consolidation of the beachhead positions and the thrust inland. The weather was none too good, but the little ship plugged on manfully to the beach.
I had 32 men on the boat. 3 men got off the boat and made the beach, and they were cut down immediately. Then the bullets started coming into the boat, and we lost about 14 or 15 men.
Shadows of history don't fade, they sharpen. A single photograph from June 6, 1944, once tucked away in dusty archives, has re-emerged with chilling clarity. When experts applied modern technology and zoomed in, the details they uncovered left them pale. Could a grainy shot of Normandy's beaches hide something we were never meant to see? Tonight, we peel back the layers of one of history's most iconic battles. Not through words, but through the frozen moments captured by camera lenses. What was revealed in this one image may forever change how we see D-Day.
D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion of all time, and the beginning of the end of the Second World War.
The photo that froze chaos. War photography has always carried a paradox. On one hand, it offers evidence, an unshakable record of reality. On the other hand, it freezes something that was never meant to be paused: chaos. The D-Day landings of June 6, 1944, are remembered in grainy, urgent black and white images. They have been printed in history books, etched into documentaries, and shown in classrooms around the world. Yet one photograph in particular, overlooked for decades in military archives, has resurfaced with haunting clarity. When it was first developed, it seemed like nothing more than another stormy glimpse of Omaha Beach. But as technology advanced, new analysis brought out details that made even seasoned historians grow uneasy. Of course, the photo manifested what one expects: soldiers charging, knee-deep in water, rifles clutched in their hands toward the camera, with smoke from the big guns shrouding the background, and the landing craft almost indistinguishable in the mist behind them. To a casual eye, however, it represented just another snapshot of bravery in action. But, to the careful observer, something was off in its composition. With a very heavily acute angle, the shot drew not only the body in foreground, but also stretched a long sweep of shoreline behind it. This wide perspective, likely unintentional in the confusion, would come to prove important for what would later come to be uncovered. When researchers started digitally sharpening that photograph, their initial focus was on the troops. They intended to identify the units, to trace the insignia, even to ascertain which company had been so dramatically present at that moment. Spanning the sharp folds of the uniforms, the tautness etched on the faces of the soldiers, not to mention the deflagration of seawater, suspended in mid-air in fact, became intended for the processing efforts. But out of the ordinary appeared something unanticipated: faint shapes beyond the soldiers that appeared incongruous amongst the blurred backdrop of war. What disturbed the photograph was not so much the incident in the foreground as the shadows lingering at the edges of the photograph. Behind the frontline soldiers, nestled among broken obstacles, a dark silhouette seemed too defined to be dismissed as debris. Its posture stood tall, upright, in stark contrast to the crouched movements of men dodging fire. Some said it could be another soldier caught mid-stride. Others thought it looked more like someone standing still, almost observing. The longer experts stared at it, the more queries they had. On top of everything else, there was the fact that formal records said no friendly units of any kind were present in the same coordinates when the shot was fired. The mapping of the battlefield was painstakingly detailed, and every regiment's advance was noted hour by hour. According to the logs, no Allied soldier should have been standing where that silhouette was noted. Was it a German figure, hiding behind cover, watching? Something else altogether? Someone who shouldn't be there? A first D-Day photo appeared to suggest that the chaos we think we know might not be the whole story. If that single image could bear a secret figure in full view for close to 80 years, what else could the lenses have potentially caught that day? What most unsettled historians was not merely the sense that here was perhaps an unrecorded presence, but rather that it had been there all along, waiting for someone to perceive it. It was as though history itself held its breath until the technology became sharp enough to notice. And if that figure existed, if that shadow was indeed cast by someone not mentioned, unrecognized, and unacknowledged, then this would suggest that our account of D-Day might be missing a relevant thread. Yet this was only the beginning. Zooming in further turned the ordinary into the unexplainable. A face that shouldn't be there. When the photograph was sharpened even further, what emerged was no longer a shadow or a blur. It was a face, clear, human, and undeniable. Experts froze in silence as the enhanced pixels formed features that had never been seen before. Not in the original print, not in any reprint, not even in the fragile negatives stored away for decades. Now, through modern clarity, the stranger in the chaos had a face. At first glance, it might have been dismissed as one more soldier, but the details did not fit. His uniform seemed wrong, mismatched, almost as if it had been cobbled together from different sources. The helmet bore no standard Allied insignia, nor did it match the distinct markings of German troops. Worse still, his expression, captured in that single frozen instant, did not resemble the strain of battle or the desperation of men sprinting under gunfire. He appeared calm, almost detached, like someone observing rather than participating. Historians began to compare rosters from both sides. Every regiment, every battalion, every documented photograph of German and Allied soldiers was pulled for comparison. Nothing matched. No records placed this man on Omaha Beach. No casualty reports or post-battle prisoner logs bore his description. He had appeared as though in that one moment, was photographed, and then disappeared. Some suggested he could have been a civilian caught in the crossfire, a French villager who somehow found himself stranded in the invasion zone. But that theory quickly unraveled. The face looked too young for an older villager and too weathered for a child. But his jawline, his eyes, and his posture suggested he had military training. And not to forget, civilians on the beaches that morning were almost unheard of. Most of them either fled to the inland or had been evacuated long before the landings. Some think far darker theories. Could he have been a spy? In fact, both Allied and Axis powers had sent stealthy operatives into these divisions in order to pour misinformation into the area and scout out defenses. A spy going about the most photographed military operation in history. What kind of game would he have been playing? The photograph gives just enough evidence to make this theory chillingly plausible. Very special uniform, and his piercing gaze spoke of someone who had come not to fight, but to gather intelligence. But even the most exhausting theories have something there about this face that unsettles. Enhanced under AI resolution, the man's eyes appeared fixed, not on the war spilling around him, but rather on the camera itself. From thousands of faces blurred in motion and panic during D-Day, this one seemed to shimmer outside the flow of time. Whereas everyone else was caught up in the chaos, this man was above it. That simple detail made many feel as though they themselves were being watched. Unsettling sensations loomed larger still as forensic analysts attempted to align the facial architecture against available archives. There were no matches. The man could not match with British ID photo or the German recruitment records. No genealogical searches through family archives in digitized form could be of any help. In this era, when tracing nearly every soldier's face is possible, his was a blank. An identity without a name, a soldier without a nation. Even skeptics said it was peculiar. Some said it could have been a photographic illusion, shadows and grain behaving as if to produce an illusion. However, it was the same technology employed to resolve many historical photographs previously without any such illusions. If it were really an illusion, it would certainly be unique among various wartime records. But the real shock came when analysts examined what the figure was carrying in his hands. The object. No one can explain. Once the face of the mysterious figure was enhanced, analysts expected the rest of the image to confirm something ordinary: a rifle, a pack, a grenade. But when they sharpened the photo around the man's hands, the unease in the room shifted to shock. What he carried was not a standard-issue weapon of the era. It wasn't a Garand rifle, not a German Kar 98K, not even one of the clunky machine guns often dragged across the beaches that morning. Instead, the object gleamed with straight metallic edges and a design unfamiliar to any known wartime arsenal. At first, experts thought the distortion was a trick of the surf. Saltwater spray and smoke could easily warp details in an old black and white image. But repeated passes with different enhancement techniques confirmed the same result. The object was real, solid, and shaped, unlike anything else seen on D-Day. It seemed boxy, almost mechanical, with a shine that reflected light differently from the worn steel of standard weapons. The man gripped it firmly, like someone accustomed to its weight, suggesting it wasn't a random piece of debris he had picked up. Fast dissemination of speculation. Some military historians even floated the possibility that it was an early prototype, a weapon being covertly tested against the backdrop of the invasion. After all, war was raked by experimental airplanes and the coded communications devices. Could such a figure be a part of some clandestine program? Field testing something never to be recorded? If so, the implications were massive. It meant that most documented invasions in history had even hidden evidence of classified technology being deployed without public knowledge, but other people weren't. In their opinion, the object was not similar to a weapon at all. Some believed that it looked more like something like a device, thing more like a camera, a transmitter, or even scientific equipment. Its sharp edges and structured design seemed more like a tool than a gun. If doing so, then why would a man be calmly holding such an object in the middle of one of the fiercest beach assaults of history, instead of shooting back at the enemy? Whirlwinds of theories came about. Is he recording data, sending signals, collecting something from the battleground? All were nonsensical at the chaos occurring that morning, but the evidence was undeniable. Whatever it wasn't standard issue. The most frightening detail was brought to light as the magnification pushed further. On one side of the object, vague etchings appeared as lines, unlike scratched or random marks at all. Some experts maintained that they resembled signs, possibly letters or numbers, constructed on purpose. The dilemma was that nobody could agree on what they read. Some thought it was a series of German characters, while others insisted it looked like an Allied code. Some even thought that the symbols did not fit with any known alphabet at all. For days, debates went on within resound closed compasses of archivists and historians. The thing was obvious, yet unidentifiable. Every attempt to classify it just collided against an obstacle. Museums had nothing like it in their collections. It didn't turn out in armories and private collections either. If it were a prototype, it would have disappeared oily without a trace after this day. If it were really something else, then it would have been buried deep under decades of silence. Yet, an even stranger clue came not from the man himself, but from something scrawled nearby. The words in the sand. When analysts turned their attention from the mysterious object to the ground beneath it, They didn't expect to find anything unusual. But as the software enhanced the grains of wet sand, something began to emerge. Faint, deliberate lines carved into the earth. At first, the markings looked like nothing more than overlapping scuffs, the kind of chaos left behind by boots and dragged equipment. But the more the image sharpened, the more it became clear. These were not random scratches. They were letters. Just below the figure's feet, in the blurred patch of shoreline, lay a series of words etched into the sand. The tide hadn't yet washed them away, and the debris scattered nearby had partly concealed them. Yet AI magnification peeled back the blur until the message revealed itself, faint but unmistakable. Some claimed it spelled out initials. Others argued it was a phrase, written hastily, almost desperately. And the most unsettling theory? That the words were a warning. It was as if the letters were arranged in 3 short segments. To some it read, "No time." Others swore it looked like "not them." Others even thought the letters could be initials, a soldier marking his name in the last moments, before becoming lost in chaos. Historians went into violent disagreement, but what made it all the more alarming was not the translation, but simply the fact that someone took the time to write it. Think about it. Even as shells rained down and bullets screamed over the surf during what was probably the most violent amphibious invasion in history, someone will actually kneel down. This is not an accident. This is deliberate, and whoever did it wanted someone to see it. This discovery lit a fire underneath experts. If it were a soldier leaving his initials, what were they doing right next to the mysterious object-bearing one? If the warning was no time, was it maybe a kind of coded message to someone else nearby? And if not them, who in fact were being singled out as outsiders, located in the midst of battles crammed with allies and Axis alike? The arguments penetrated well beyond historians. Linguists, psychologists, and even code breakers joined in to try to reconstruct meaning. Some proposed that the letters might represent a kind of military shorthand, some system now forgotten. Others claimed it was graffiti left by troops on their way into the invasion, German forces that had used the beaches as strongholds. But detractors said the markings would have vanished under the tide long before the first dawn of D-Day. These letters appeared fresh, to most disturbing meaning from those who are allied to the words, actually with the figure himself. If he was not affiliated with the known unit, or if he carried an object that did not match wartime technology, the message in the sand is probably not for soldiers or maybe directed at him or by him. A bequeathed warning scrawled in desperation before vanishing into the fog of history. And here he goes, a step more bizarre. In the archives, along with the original print of the photo, the researchers unearthed the field notebook of the photographer. It was catalogued many years ago, but has rarely been researched by people. By casually flipping through its delicate pages, the experts found something intriguing: a missing entry. A page was ripped out on the exact day the photograph was taken, and in the margin of the earlier page hangs a faint note: told not to publish certain frames. What made this detail spine-chilling was its connection to another forgotten witness: the photographer's secret notes. Every great photograph carries the perspective of the person behind the lens. In the chaos of D-Day, dozens of war correspondents risked their lives to capture moments that would become history. But the man who took this particular shot seemed to have carried more than just film. He carried secrets. When researchers examined his field notebook, they found pages filled with the ordinary details of a frontline journalist: coordinates, lighting notes, quick sketches of terrain, even names of soldiers he had spoken with. Yet, when they reached the section covering June 6, 1944, something unusual jumped out. A page was missing, torn neatly from the binding, leaving only faint fibers along the seam, as if carefully removed rather than lost to wear. What would cause a page to disappear from the very day the photo was taken, thereby evoking such disquiet? More bizarre was the note written on the margin of the preceding entry. Faint pencil, hardly legible after decades, says, "Told not to publish certain frames." That single line cast a whole new light on the inquiry. Who told him? And what was there to conceal so badly? The military censors vetted all the photographs before public release. Many of those images showing troop positions, classified equipment, or bloody casualties were withheld for security or morale purposes. But the tone of the note was altogether different. This was not the usual run-of-the-mill bureaucratic nonsense, was personal. It specified certain frames, not categories. It suggested that someone saw the negatives and intervened directly. The fact sent historians trawling through military records. It turned out that the photographer submitted a batch of pictures on June 8th, 2 days after the landings. Some cleared and published were bogged down, but informed images of a soldier wading through surf. Others carried, however, a simple red stamp, restricted. Those limited frames were never released, and interestingly, not even an explanation of the reason for the restriction was preserved. The connection to the newly found picture was already made. Could this photo, one now showing a strange figure, an unknown object, and words in the sand, have been among those certain frames? If so, it meant that the mystery was not a product of modern imagination. It was complex enough in 1944 to be suppressed deliberately. Going deeper, the researchers found out that even the photographer wrote many letters home after the war. One such letter that belongs to a certain private collection contained a coded line, probably to a fellow correspondent. "Some shots I never wanted to take, but they wouldn't let me throw them away either." That sentence certainly bore the weight of torn between duty and fear, so perhaps it hints at even more dangerous images never meant to be seen in daylight. The fact that the photographer died young, and just a few years after the war, was said to have died of sudden illness. Some would call that bad timing for conspiracy theorists, but a coincidence it was for others. If indeed he was silenced to keep those frames buried, then how weird it seemed that his photo survived at all in an accident, or maybe as a quiet rebellion against censorship. Such a revelation, along with the missing notebook page and rather cryptic notes, brought up the whole discussion beyond just some strange figure or unusual object caught on camera. It was about intent. Someone somewhere was hell-bent on not allowing the world to witness what this camera had captured. If that wasn't enough, experts then enhanced the far distance of the shot and found eyes staring back. The eyes watching the invasion. For decades, the photograph had been studied for its depiction of bravery, its sheer scale of chaos, and its reminder of sacrifice. But no one had ever noticed what lay hidden in the distant haze. When modern tools magnified the farthest edges of the frame, deep within the shadows of a shattered bunker, two glints appeared. At first, they looked like imperfections in the film. Scratches, light leaks, the kind of damage common in old negatives. But repeated analysis confirmed otherwise. They were not flaws. They were eyes. Set high within the darkness of a ruin, the eyes reflected the light of dawn. They were steady, unflinching, and disturbingly clear. Unlike the soldiers sprinting through surf or collapsing under fire, the figure attached to those eyes was motionless, calm, watching. It was as if the invasion, with all its fury, was unfolding as a performance before an unseen observer. Historians were quick to suggest the most likely alternative: a German sniper's nest. After all, Such positions lined the cliffs all along. Many Allied soldiers perished at the hands of sharpshooters concealed in pillboxes and ruins. Yet, detail proved the enemy. Not a rifle muzzle protruded from the shadows, nor did any helmet glint or uniform outline conform to the expected silhouette of a crouched sniper. Just those eyes, bizarrely bright, visible behind the mist. When forensic imaging brought the surrounding structure into sharp focus, something stranger appeared. The bunker where the eyes were appearing was supposed to be empty. Allied reports and after-action maps confirm this had been obliterated by naval bombardment long before the landing craft reached the shore. That stronghold was marked as entirely blown up, with its defenders presumed dead or fled. Yet here in the photograph was undeniable evidence of a presence that was never supposed to exist. The unsettling calmness of the eyes sparked debates. Survivors of Omaha often spoke of chaos, of fear so intense that men barely remembered their own movements. Yet the figure behind those eyes seemed detached, as though insulated from danger. It was not the stare of someone fighting for survival. It was the look of someone who knew more than the men below. Psychologists brought in to analyze the image described the gaze as observer's detachment. Not the tunnel vision of combat, but the focus of a person studying an event rather than experiencing it. That detail disturbed many in the research team. Why would someone be calmly watching one of the deadliest moments in modern warfare, and how did they end up in a bunker that was supposed to be rubble? By winter, online speculation got underway. Some insisted that it was a survivor from the bombardment, one soldier who had somehow endured to carry on hiding. Others believed it might have been one of the officers or operatives in the theater, cognizant of events for reasons lost to time. But then a much darker narrative began to form. As various online communities began dissecting the image, it became apparent that the reflections in the eyes were sharper than those of the rest of the photo, as if whatever had looked from that bunker could not have been part of the same moment, the same blur, in 1944. This theory, however wild, reverberated with the unease that historians felt but couldn't name. Something about those eyes spoke of an awareness that transcended their time. They did not merely witness history, but seemed to anticipate it. Then came the bombshell. Somewhere in the archives, deep inside a mislabeled envelope, lay another roll of film. That same day, he had taken further photographs that, appallingly for him, were never released, never catalogued, and, perhaps, never meant to be seen. And just when the mystery seemed unsolvable, another photo surfaced, one that tied everything together. The hidden roll of film. For months, researchers thought they had reached the limits of the mystery. The figure, the strange object, the words in the sand, the eyes in the distance. Each clue raised questions but left no final answers. Then came the discovery that reopened everything. Deep in the archives of a forgotten storage facility, a mislabeled envelope surfaced. Inside was a small roll of film, brittle from age, marked with the photographer's initials. It was dated June 1944. The roll contained frames taken only minutes apart from the now infamous photograph. Yet, unlike the public images, these had never been catalogued, never published, and never even printed. When they were finally restored, what appeared on the negatives stunned everyone who saw them. Arabian Nights were said to have inspired the word "run," the frantic motion of soldiers storming the beach, and billows of smoke and chaos just about everywhere matched several shots of the scene from the first photo. But scattered among them are frames that seem to have been deliberately obscured. Blurs from motion, too extreme for any steady photographer. Bands of shadow as if something had passed in front of the lens. Some frames seemed double exposed. Perhaps the camera had gathered two overlapping realities at one instant. Yet the most disquieting aspect of all arose when the researchers juxtaposed the hidden negatives with the corresponding print. The shadowy figure had again manifested in that suppressed role. This time, however, the figure was seen in light with a different orientation. Close up, sharp, and unmistakably holding that same metallic object. Now it was as if his posture were altered. He had seemed to have been coming towards the soldiers, moving forward as all others rushed past. Could the frames have been hidden just out of confusion, caused by bad exposure and unusable images? Or had someone ensured that they would never see the light of day? Now, the importance of that missing page from the photographer's notebook seemed larger than life. Told not to publish certain frames. No, those frames were there. Historians had one shot among others to send all into shock. The figure in the shot addressed all directly, seemingly frozen in strange calmness, with a hint of additional evidence, almost a smile at the corner of the lips. Soldiers blurred about it in frantic movement. Alone, it remained perfectly in focus, like the still point in a storm. And below his feet, the faint lines of words in the sand were clearer than before. Continual debate brouhaha by experts on this issue. Some say that this photograph just shows a moment of eerie coincidence. Others believe it is proof of extreme wartime censorship, hiding operatives or equipment never destined to be in the public eye. And then again, there were whispers that probably the photos allude to something beyond it, that this figure, the object, and the gaze in the shadow are not part of history at all, but came across it for reasons unknown. No matter the truth, the hidden role has confirmed one thing beyond doubt. Someone went to great lengths to bury these images in 1944. For nearly 80 years, they have succeeded. Only now, with modern restoration, have they come back to life again. And the fact that experts turned pale when they finally saw them proves that even history's most documented moments still have secrets left to tell. An invasion of Normandy and the point of no return for World War II, the day of valor, confusion, and sacrifice. But within these photographs lies another story, the unfinished one, probably never to be elucidated fully. The hidden roll of film is more than just a relic. It is a keepsake. The most disconcerting part for the researchers was that no one spoke a word about such a roll having existed. No logbooks mentioned it, no supplies indicated where it was stored, and none of the photographer's peers remembered such frames ever being taken. The envelope appeared without a source, as if it had been quietly handed from one set of hands to another over the decades. The complete lack of any formal trail opened up a rather disturbing possibility that the thing was not just lost at all, but hidden away from fate by person or persons consciously. If this deep dive into D-Day's hidden photographs left you questioning history, hit that like button, drop your theories in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that peel back time's curtain. Don't stop here. The next video on your screen takes you deeper into mysteries history tried to bury.